SneakPeek program for this brand new exhibit that opens officially tomorrow. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm Jane Lavino, Curator of Education here at the National Museum of Wildlife Art. And as I said, it opens officially tomorrow, November 4th. It will be up all winter, and the last day for the exhibit is April 21, 2024. So Benjamin Mkapa African Wildlife Photography Awards is generously sponsored by the Charles Engelhard Foundation, Adrian and John Mars, Courtney and Chip Marvin, Lightner Sam's Foundation, Sue Cedarholm and Kent Nelson, Annette and Noah Osnos, Lindy and Hanley Sayers, Singleton Peary Financial, and Jade and David Walsh. The exhibit begins right in this room, which is called the Bison Gallery, right where we're standing, and it extends through that doorway into the other room with the black paint on the walls, and also it extends into the Artist's Theater, which is right across Pathways Gallery, the little video watching area. There is a film that connects to this exhibit, so make sure you check that out as well. Let's see, Dr. Tammy Hanawalt, our Curator of Art, will speak to us briefly, and then she will introduce our guest presenter, Kadu Sabunya, who is with us from the African Wildlife Foundation. And I also want to take a moment to thank the entire curatorial staff, and they have done an amazing job putting this exhibit together. Tammy, as who you heard mentioned before, along with Dr. Kenneth Forte, Emily Winters, and Katia Rodriguez. They've really been working tirelessly, and it looks beautiful. So thank you for coming again, and Tammy, I hand it over to you, wherever you are.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to start this morning with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the museum is located on the ancestral lands of the Shoshone-Bannock and Eastern Shoshone peoples, with many others having historic ties to the region. Please join us in acknowledging these indigenous communities, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. The museum is committed to amplifying Native voices and increasing representation in our permanent collection. I am so pleased to represent our speaker today. Kadu Sabunya has been the Chief Executive Officer of the African Wildlife Foundation since January of 2019. He leads the organization in realizing its vision of modern Africa, where human development agendas incorporate thriving wildlife and wildlands as cultural and economic assets for Africa's future generations. His work with the African governments and the private sector has led to a significant shift towards conservation as a priority across the continent. Please help me welcome Kadu Sabunya.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you very much. Karibu sana, as we say in East Africa. Thank you very much for making the time to come for the sneak preview of our exhibition. This has been great to be here again, and thanks for the warm introduction of me and my team here from African Wildlife Foundation. And thanks for helping to organize this event. I'm really happy to be back. The first time I came back when it was just an idea, we discussed about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And now it's really nice to see its fruitfulness here today. And I must say that I've blown away. Each time I've just walked through this beautiful and magnificent and definitely unmatched exhibition so far. NWA is delighted to partner with the National Museum of Wildlife Art to bring photographic inspirations from Africa, Africa's natural world, to Jackson Hole via this beautiful exhibition. The photographs are from the second edition of Benjamin Mkapa Africa Wildlife Foundation Award, produced in partnership with Nature's Best Photography, who are here present today. What separates us, the Mkapa Photographer Awards Foundation, photograph exhibition, and the photo competition across the world, is our core commitment to conservation through especially the categories, as we explained them, are the topics of concern in the work we do in Africa. For example, the coexistence category. You see photos representing that category as the people and wildlife need to coexist and live together. We have photographs on the floor that represent wildlife at risk. We have photographs that represent conservation heroes, and so on. I don't want to spoil it. This is the same, so you hear more from others. These issues, though, are really pertinent and at the heart of Africa's Wildlife Foundation's vision to ensure that wildlife and wildlands thrive in a modern world. Our hope tonight is that through photography, we can inspire you to imagine an Africa where wildlife and people thrive alongside each other, where we successfully navigate coexistence and conflict, and where wildlife are no longer at risk, and where everyone in some way or another is a conservation hero. This is the vision we can all embrace, and one where we can all play the role. These wildlife and photographs you see, while they are from Africa, they belong to all of us. Africa is just a custodian of these magnificent assets that the global world we enjoy today, and we must protect for our grandchildren. So thank you very much for coming. Thanks again for the museum for this wonderful exhibition. Thanks Nature's Best for the partnership. Thanks all, and we're going to interact more. So thank you very, very much for the opportunity.
So I'm wondering, Kadu, if you could take us through and point out the themes so people understand the different themes. And maybe we can end up down in the far corner.
Okay.
And I would love for Peter Mangold, who's with us. He's a Jackson photographer who has a photo in this exhibition. It's a fabulous one. And I just asked him if he photographs frequently in Africa. He said it was his first time to Africa when he took that photo. So if you could lead us to maybe the different themes and point them out,
Absolutely.
and then we'll end up by Peter's photo and he can talk about that.
Thank you very much. And I will seek also help from colleague Craig, who is our Senior Vice President.
Great.
Yeah, and Stephen from Nature's Best, who we've collaborated so closely. The team is big, so I can't really do it alone, but
yes.
Craig, please, if you can identify yourself,
That would be great.
and Stephen.
Yeah. We have some other great people with us today from the African Wildlife Foundation, and they are Craig, right there, and
Steve from Nature.
Steve from Nature's
Best.
Nature's Best, yes.
Now
thank
Jenny
you.
here, and where's Michelle? Michelle, right there. So, yes, why don't you, let me start from here, just at the back here. These are coexistence and conflict, and I mentioned that in my brief. But these are really, they are wonderful photos, yes, but they portray to us the future of the continent. I sometimes joke, but which is a fact, that Google Map has failed to catch up with Africa. Because you don't dare come to Africa and follow Google Map, because they'll tell you turn left, turn around, and it's a building, it's a bridge, it's an infrastructure that has been come up. So this is what's going on in Africa. You can see these cranes. But this has been home for wildlife. So a big part of our program is to find approaches, strategies in how wildlife and the development of Africa coexist. Understanding that development is non-negotiable, Africa is going to develop, but not at the expense of wildlife, but for wildlife. So these are really portraying a big part of that. This is my favorite here of coexistence, the zebra behind that wall. That's one of the favorite from this category. That's Nairobi National Park, the only city with a national park in the middle. And that is quite, the wildlife trying to coexist with a rail line that has gone through the national park. And that's one of the categories. You want to add something?
I was just going to talk about this photograph.
Yes.
When I saw this photograph for the first time, I was one of the judges, as was Steve. And I looked at it and I said, it's got to be in the coexistence and conflict categories. Because depending upon how you look at it, you can interpret it two ways. On the one hand, you've got a pair of African kids who are totally and completely disrupting that white pelican flock. And so that's conflict to a degree. But when I looked at it for the first time, I saw the kids celebrating wildlife. And that made me smile. And so I think the imagery here is all about interpretation, and obviously it's very, very striking, and you'll have fun going around and looking at all of it.
It's beautiful, I love it.
Yeah, we have a category of co-creation. This is really catching up with the modern world. While people are taking with the modern cameras and modern equipment, we really wanted to allow people to be a little bit more creative, that's the future of a part of photography. And this really portrays some of those images of the creativity of that. But beyond that, portrays ideas of wildlife that is really at threat. This one right here in the middle is one of the winners too. That pangolin is one of the most, if not the most trafficked mammal in the world. Africa loses close to 1 million of them a year. So that is really portrays the challenge we have and the things we need to do going forward. So that is what this is. I think the rest really of this room is. Of course, we have the lions at the background. That was so. That's.
This is wildlife portraits.
Portraits, yeah. All of these are really wildlife portraits. Just magnificent, a show of what Africa holds, which reminds us that 30% of the global biodiversity is in Africa. A third of fresh water is on the African continent. And now it's the youngest continent, with about 1.3 billion people, and 70% of those are below 30 years old. So that is the magnificence of the continent and the challenges offering all of us on this planet. But this is wildlife, which needs to exist with the 1.3 billion young people, and that's the aspirations.
Kadu, before we leave this room,
Yeah.
I want to point out the mobile phone category. One of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that everybody had access to the competition. Not everybody has a fancy camera, but even in Africa, most people have a phone. And so we opened it up to everybody. I see Steve Freely over there with his phone. But imagine, everybody gets access. You can photograph wildlife in your backyard. You can take your phone to the savannah, photograph wildlife. This lovely caracal shot, a really, really lovely medium-sized cat in Africa, was taken with a mobile phone. And so that's one of the things that I think we're quite happy about. This competition was open to everybody, and we, in the end, received entries from 58 countries throughout the world. This particular competition began with about 10,000 photos. And so what you're looking at are 48 of the best at this particular point.
Okay, I think we'll come back to see the individual photos. These are wonderful photos. Our programs, we manage, support our partners in Africa. The landscapes where we work, we support and manage more than 66% of Africa's primates are supported by the work we do, and supported by a lot of you in this room who work and support the African Wildlife Foundation. But he's worked with primates more than I have, so I don't want to him to correct me when and yet he's here. So
I've
please
learned not to correct you.
please go ahead.
These photographs are some of my favorites because as Kadu said, I've had the opportunity to work with great apes in the field. I worked with Diane Fossey in the late 1970s. I directed the Mountain Gorilla Project in Rwanda in the late 1980s. So all of these photographs are near and dear to my heart. Great apes are a focus of AWS work. We work in a bunch of different landscapes throughout Africa. Mountain gorillas, these two photographs, this big male silverback, the grand prize winner is obviously a very, very powerful photograph. I always say that when you look into the eyes of a gorilla, you see a lot of yourself looking back. And so go take a look at those eyes and think about what you're thinking. This lovely image of a very, very young, probably 3 or 4 week old infant mountain gorilla is so striking. It shows the tenderness that exists between a mother and infant. Common chimpanzees, an endangered great ape. We work in a landscape wherein probably 2/3 of the chimpanzees in the world exist, and they're very, very important relative to the protection that we provide. And then this lowland gorilla photograph is amazing because unlike mountain gorillas, wherein you can go to Rwanda, Uganda, purchase a permit and go out into the field to see them pretty regularly. I'm just back from Rwanda about 2.5 weeks ago, and we were sitting in their presence as I'm sitting here talking to you. An amazing experience. That's not the case with lowland gorillas. They're very tough to see because of the habitat, and when we looked at this photograph and saw how amazing it was, to capture that kind of photograph in a lowland rainforest is just an amazing accomplishment, and that's why it rose to the top relative to this particular African wildlife at risk category.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I don't want to tell you so much. So, 70% of African population youth, the youth category, out of 1.3 billion people. We all know statistically that the next 1 billion is already baked. If they are below that, so Africa is going to be what 4 billion people, which will lead us in the next perhaps 40 years. 4 out of 10 young people are going to be Africans. So what they eat, how they travel, how they live is going to determine if these species we are looking at here today will thrive. So that is a core part of our work. So this category is very important. We need to raise awareness. We need to build their capacity. They need to be understanding what is at stake. They need to lead the conservation work that needs to be done. And they need to be asking their leaders for the right policies, strategies, and systems to make sure that these exist. So this category is very, very important for us to get young people involved. It's harder for them because taking a very good photo requires about a month or 2 in a wilderness, and these kids, they either have a job or they are students, and it's expensive to do it. So this category was flexible enough to get them some equipment to do that, to partner with some national parks to allow them in for free entry to stay in, partner with the tourism industry to allow them to have opportunities to take this wonderful photography. So that is really the winner I think was 18 or something?
18 and 15.
18 and 15. Who took these wonderful photos, not with very, very expensive equipment. So it shows us that anyone can do that. And then yes.
I was just going to say what was interesting, and I think Steve will agree with me, that when we took a look at the imagery throughout the competition for the first time, many of these photos stood out, and we were amazed that many of these photos were competing for many of the highly visible categories throughout the rest of the competition. And we even considered a couple of these photographs for the grand prize. So the competition was really, really nicely balanced between the engagement of youth, amateur photographers, and also pros from out the world.
No, thank you. I think the behaviors, I mean, we all, this is what, apart from the science, this is what we are practicing as wildlife. It's their behavior. This is the backbone of the tourism industry in Africa, which is critical and critically important for the work of conservation and sustaining wildlife. It supports almost 70% of financing of protected areas in Africa comes from tourism. And the tourists arrive on the continent because they want to see the behaviors of wildlife in their natural setting. So the wildlife and for what we do in protecting their habitats creates this kind of imagery you see here. And the judges did what they did, and you know, this is my favorite. The judges may not agree with me, but this rhino and the story. Please take time to read. Take time to read the plaques, because the story of this and how that photo came out, and is I won't cheat, but you know, I won't spoil it too. Is the story here is touching. How this photographer took this rhino. So this is really, for me, represents the tourism industry and why it's so critical to it. The last thing I'll say about the industry is perhaps two things. One is the protected wildlife is increasingly found outside protected areas because due to climate change. So they're looking for food outside protected areas, which means either we need to protect more land, or which is harder because some of the projects are not managed even well, or we support private landowners to do the work. That's the choice we've taken at the Africa Wildlife Foundation. So we work closely with private landowners in conservancies, and that is 100% supported by tourism. So the behaviors there, the landscapes is critical. The other point I'll make is tied into the youth, that while international rivals are critical through this industry, we are working hard to increase domestic tourism. Africa is given opportunity to see wildlife. So that conversation starts among Africans, why this is important. So domestic tourism is equally important for the conservation work we need to do. International rivals are critical, they bring the dollar. Domestic raises the awareness so that those two can meet to create the sustainability formula we are all working towards. So this is critical. Just quickly, so that I let you do the viewing. The state. So these are really. I've used the word favorite so many times, so maybe now it doesn't make any sense. I mean, with photography, you can't help yourself. But this category of wildlife in your backyard is critical to all of us, not only in Africa, but all of us, because it really demonstrates that biodiversity is not only in national parks. Biodiversity is also found everywhere we are. Human being, a human species, we are part of biodiversity. We are counted. So this category here is critical, that we also need to take care of the biodiversity in our backyards, biodiversity in our agricultural areas, biodiversity in our road paths, footpaths, wherever we are. So this category is critical. And we all gone through this pandemic. We know how critical it was when we couldn't move, we couldn't leave homes. And we concentrated so much. If you want to see wildlife, we're going to look outside your window. And some of these people did. You read the plaques. You see some of these photographs, how they came about. I now moving to this photo. This one is really the creativity again. Craig, you might want to help me here. I think this is
art in nature.
art in nature, yes.
Art and nature, and again, I mean, when Steve and I started designing the categories, this one popped out because we believe that nature is an art form. There's a lot of art in nature. It's kind of the inspiration that most artists get to basically do a painting or a sculpture. And so these photos represent a variety of different things. This aerial shot, I think, is kind of abstract imagery if you look at it one way, but if you look at it really, really closely, you've got a huge flock of flamingos that's on the lake with an island centrally located. And it's an aerial shot that just really popped out to us. And so this is a really, really important category within the overall competition. And then Conservation Heroes it's one of the most important as far as I'm concerned, and kind of I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, the heroes are very important, and I know, my time in the US, I know how dear it is to you also among your communities. Heroes, there's so many heroes for this country. So is in conservation. These people are really why wildlife exists. They are the food soldiers. I regard myself as a talking head, as you've witnessed. But these are the real people who actually do the on-ground work, do the research, do the inventories. You can't manage what you can't count. We know how many wildlife. I can tell you, elephants are about just below 500,000 in Africa. We know that number. We know that our programs manage about 30% of the elephant herd on the continent. We can count it. So because of these heroes, but also they bring the stories to life. You visit some of these areas, it's the guides, it's the researchers, it's the managers, it's the park officials who are going to tell us the stories of the habitats. They're telling us the stories of the challenges. This is how we craft our work based on the experiences and evidences being collected on threats. But also this is when we know we are succeeding and invest more in those things that are working. So there are a number of heroes in the world, but in conservation too, in those categories.
I want to put things in context because I think it's really, really important for everybody to understand that the heroes of conservation on the continent today are Africans. That wasn't the case 60 years ago, but AWF had the vision to basically create a number of wildlife colleges on the continent that have now produced over 10,000 conservation professionals working in a Pan-African way. I think it's also really, really important for everyone to understand that these people are risking their lives on a day-to-day basis. In the context of the last 5 years, we've lost over 1,000 rangers on the continent who risk their lives to protect elephants and rhinos and big cats. And so the future of Africa is in their hands, and that's what AWF is all about. That's what we strive for, and I think it represents some of the importance of this competition.
Thank you very much. And I think that's a great intro into Pierre's work here, because he's showing that one of the future people who really are going to be the custodians of wildlife. Many of us gray-haired, we are borrowing our experiences from the young generation, and therefore they're critical for them to understand what is at stake, and also empowered to play the role they need to play because they are the custodians. So Peter, why don't you explain your...
So I'm the photographer behind this photo here, and it was my first time to Africa, and it will certainly not be my last. But of all the photos that I had submitted to this competition, I think it's really powerful that this one became part of the gallery, because this encompasses pretty much everything that he has talked about as we walked around through here. So not only is it about the youth, the child here, but it's about everybody coming together. And so even a part of Jackson's even in this photograph. So kind of the story behind it is my now fiance and I were planning on going to photograph and film for the organization that is putting on all the conservation work here called Peace for Conservation, and they do an enormous amount of work all through Serengeti and Tarangire National Parks. And so they are trying to get children and teach children about the conservation efforts that they're doing and bring them into the conversation. And in order to do that, they need to be able to come into some of these villages. Now, a lot of these villages aren't always apt for just kind of outsiders coming in. So what they've done is they have provided accessibility, like wheelchairs, for children and for the adults, and that helps them kind of come into the villages and say, hey, you know, we're here to help. We are not here to just come in and start making rules. We want to work together as a team. And actually, Teton Adaptive Sports is the organization that donated this wheelchair, and we brought it over with us. So there is a part of Jackson in this photo. And what they are doing here is they are teaching the children how to paint wildlife. The children love painting, and that provides them with a way of an income in the future when tourists and other people come in. They want to buy paintings, and that provides a source of income for the children who may not have a long-standing career, especially someone with disabilities. He can't farm, he can't work, but here he can happily paint giraffes and other wildlife as well. So for me, this really just kind of encompasses it all. It's just protecting the wildlife. It teaches them that, hey, you know, we need this wildlife. If we don't have wildlife, I have nothing to paint. You know, people want to come and see the wildlife. They're generous. Everybody wants to work together. It's not a them versus us. It's not they want this thing, so we have to do this thing. It's just everybody working together. And to see this in print is pretty incredible for me, especially here with among all this other amazing artwork.
No, thank you very much.
I'm checking the time here, and we need to start wrapping it up.
Sure.
But I would like to open it up to questions, so if anyone in the audience has a question for, for Craig, for Kadu, for Peter, please step up and ask your question.
There was an elephant shot over there with a flower in his mouth. Is that what they sustain themselves on, is flowers? Elephants?
They eat a variety of different vegetation. This one just happened to be in the swamp, and the lily was available, and ended up with that lovely shot. That's one of my favorites. It's really intimate. But a big bull elephant can consume maybe 250 to 300 pounds of forage a day. So they're eating lots of things, ranging from grass to basically small tree twigs to bark and
fruits.
And fruits too.
Great. Any other questions?
The circular thing that's on the far wall, what is that? What is that thing?
Oh, it's
that's a lizard tail.
right? The chameleon tail?
Yeah, it's a chameleon tail.
That's amazing that it's so tight like that.
Yeah. No, that also it almost made it into the art category, but it was represented by youth, and so it ended up there.
Any other questions?